Overnight, another civilian site in Ukraine came under attack. This time, it was a hospital in southern Ukraine. According to the reported information, Russian forces struck the medical facility during the night. Several key departments inside the hospital were destroyed, civilians were injured, and medical staff survived only because they managed to reach shelter in time. That is the outline of what happened. Short sentences, direct facts, but when you slow those facts down for even a moment, the weight of them becomes difficult to ignore because hospitals operate differently at night. The lights remain on, patients are still inside, medical workers continue moving through hallways, checking rooms, monitoring equipment, responding to emergencies. The building does not sleep, and overnight, according to the report, that environment was interrupted by a strike that damaged critical sections of the facility. The report specifically states that key departments were destroyed, not lightly damaged, destroyed. And that wording matters, because in any hospital, departments are not just rooms, they are systems, connected spaces where treatment happens continuously, where staff coordinate care, where civilians arrive expecting safety, medicine, and emergency assistance. Instead, overnight, the hospital itself became the site of destruction. The timing described in the report also carries its own kind of tension. An overnight strike, darkness outside, limited visibility, people inside the building trying to understand what was happening in real time. And according to the information provided, medical staff survived because they sheltered in time. That detail changes the emotional gravity of the entire event, because it means there was enough warning or enough instinctive reaction for people inside the hospital to move toward protection before the strike hit fully. Not afterward, before. And sometimes in reports like these, the smallest detail says the most. They made it to shelter in time. A short line, but behind it is movement through hallways, doors closing, people waiting underground or behind reinforced walls while destruction unfolded above them. The report also confirms that civilians were injured. It does not provide additional numbers or identities. It does not expand further. And because the instruction here is to preserve only the stated facts, that reality remains where the report leaves it. Civilians injured, a hospital damaged, departments destroyed, medical staff surviving by sheltering in time. That is the documented sequence. You know, hospitals carry a different emotional meaning during wartime, even when reports remain entirely factual. A military position is one kind of target in public understanding of war. But a hospital represents treatment, emergency response, recovery, human vulnerability gathered into one place. And overnight in southern Ukraine, that environment was struck. The report does not describe the sound of the explosion. It does not describe smoke. It does not describe panic. But the absence of those details almost makes the confirmed facts feel sharper, because the imagination naturally fills the silence around them. A night shift interrupted, medical staff moving quickly, patients already inside the building, civilians nearby, and then destruction inside key departments of the hospital. The wording of the report is restrained. There is no dramatic flourish, no emotional language inserted into the factual description. But the reality described does not require embellishment. The phrase "key departments destroyed" already carries enormous significance. In any functioning medical facility, departments are interconnected. Emergency care depends on continuity. Treatment depends on coordination. And when key sections are destroyed, the impact extends beyond physical walls. The report confirms only what happened, not what may happen next, not what conditions look like now, only the direct outcome from the overnight strike. That distinction matters because careful reporting often speaks in boundaries. And here, the boundaries are clear. Russian forces struck a hospital in southern Ukraine overnight. Several important departments were destroyed. Civilians suffered injuries. Medical staff survived after reaching shelter in time. Those are the confirmed points presented in the source material, and tonight those details stand on their own. There is also something deeply unsettling about the phrase "sheltering in time," because embedded inside it is the possibility that timing could have gone differently. Seconds matter during air attacks, moments matter, decisions matter. And according to the report, those inside the hospital managed to protect themselves before the full impact reached them. That single fact may be the reason medical staff survived. The report does not identify the departments that were destroyed. It does not specify how many civilians were injured. It does not describe the scale of structural collapse. And so the focus remains exactly where the confirmed information places it: a hospital, southern Ukraine, overnight strike, destroyed departments, injured civilians, medical staff alive after taking shelter. The sequence repeats because the event itself is starkly simple in structure, and sometimes the most difficult reports are the ones with the fewest moving parts. No battlefield maneuver described, no long operational summary, no shifting military map, just a hospital struck during the night, a place associated with treatment suddenly becoming part of the destruction itself. There are nights in war when survival becomes the entire headline. That feeling sits quietly underneath this report, not because the wording says it directly, but because of what the confirmed facts imply about the speed and danger of the attack. Hospitals are built around urgency, even during peace, emergency response, critical care, rapid treatment. But during wartime, hospitals become something else too. Places where civilians and medical workers operate under constant uncertainty. And according to this report, that uncertainty became destruction overnight in southern Ukraine. The medical staff survived. That detail remains one of the defining points in the report. Because despite the damage, despite the destroyed departments, despite civilians being injured, the people working inside the hospital managed to reach shelter before the strike hit fully. The report leaves the event there. No extended aftermath included, no political response, no operational analysis, only the confirmed outcome from the overnight attack. And in some ways, that narrow focus makes the event feel even more immediate. One location, one strike, one night, a hospital in southern Ukraine damaged during the ongoing war. And by morning, the destruction inside several key departments had already become part of the next day's reporting. By morning, the hospital in southern Ukraine had already become part of another overnight wartime report. But the details confirmed in that report continue to carry enormous weight when examined carefully. Russian forces struck the hospital during the night. Several key departments were destroyed. Civilians were injured. Medical staff survived because they sheltered in time. Those facts remain the center of everything described here. And the timing of the strike matters deeply, because nighttime inside a hospital creates a very particular kind of environment. The pace is quieter than daytime, but the work never stops. Patients remain under observation. Emergency care continues. Medical personnel rotate through corridors, intensive care rooms, treatment stations, and monitoring areas. Machines continue running. Lights remain on in critical sections. The hospital remains alive even while much of the outside world is asleep. And according to the report, that environment was suddenly interrupted overnight by a Russian strike. The report does not explain how much warning there was. It does not describe sirens. It does not describe communications inside the building. But one line provides a clear indication that the staff reacted quickly enough to survive. They sheltered in time. That sentence changes the emotional structure of the event entirely, because it confirms movement before impact. It confirms awareness, and it confirms that the people inside understood enough danger was approaching to seek protection. Sometimes wartime reports include long operational summaries filled with numbers and locations. This one is different. It is tightly focused. One hospital, one overnight strike, one set of consequences. And because the focus is so narrow, every confirmed detail becomes heavier. Several key departments destroyed, that phrase continues to stand out. Not because of dramatic wording, but because hospitals depend on continuity between departments. Medical care is built through connected systems. One section supports another. Emergency functions depend on timing and coordination. And according to the report, several of those important sections inside the hospital were destroyed during the overnight strike. The report also confirms civilians were injured. Again, the wording remains restrained. No names, no totals, no additional descriptions, only the confirmed fact that civilians suffered injuries during the attack. And that detail matters because hospitals are civilian environments: patients, visitors, medical workers, emergency responders. These are the kinds of people normally found inside such facilities. The report does not say where inside the hospital the destruction occurred. It does not specify whether the injuries happened during the initial strike or afterward. And because the factual boundaries are strict, The focus remains exactly on what was confirmed. The hospital was struck, departments were destroyed, civilians were injured, medical staff survived by reaching shelter. You know, there is something especially difficult about imagining medical workers leaving their stations to protect themselves during an attack, because hospitals are usually places people run toward in emergencies, not places people evacuate from. And yet, according to the report, the staff inside understood they needed immediate shelter. That instinct likely saved lives. The phrase "in time" carries enormous emotional weight in this context. It suggests narrow margins, limited seconds, the difference between reaching shelter and remaining exposed. And the report makes clear that those margins mattered during the overnight strike. There is a silence that follows survival. You can almost hear it. That feeling sits quietly beneath the facts presented here. Not because the report says it directly, but because surviving an attack inside a hospital overnight changes the atmosphere of everything around it. The hospital itself also represents something larger than just a building. Hospitals symbolize continuity, treatment, protection, recovery. And during wartime, they often become among the most pressured civilian institutions in any affected region. Medical workers continue operating while broader conflict unfolds around them. Patients continue arriving. Care continues despite uncertainty. And overnight in southern Ukraine, according to the report, that environment was directly struck. The wording "key departments destroyed" also suggests targeted functional damage inside the hospital structure itself, not superficial exterior impact alone. Departments are operational centers, and when several are destroyed, the consequences affect how a hospital functions internally. But the report does not go further than that. It does not describe recovery operations. It does not describe rebuilding efforts. It does not describe patient relocation. The confirmed information remains concise. And sometimes concise reporting creates its own kind of gravity, because there is nowhere for the reader or viewer to escape emotionally. The facts arrive plainly, one after another, without interruption. Russian forces struck a hospital in southern Ukraine overnight. Several key departments were destroyed. Civilians were injured. Medical staff survived because they sheltered in time. That sequence keeps returning because it forms the entire documented framework of the event. And there is another important aspect to this report. The survival of the medical staff means the people responsible for treatment inside the hospital remained alive despite the destruction around them. That matters, especially in wartime conditions where medical personnel already operate under constant pressure. The report does not describe their condition afterward. It does not describe interviews or reactions, but the confirmed fact of their survival remains central. And perhaps that is one reason the report feels emotionally restrained yet deeply heavy at the same time. Because within the destruction described, there is also survival. Not untouched safety, not absence of danger, but survival achieved through reaching shelter before impact. The setting itself, southern Ukraine, also matters within the broader wartime environment described by many operational reports throughout the conflict. But here the article remains focused entirely on the hospital strike itself. No wider battlefield developments are introduced, no military front lines are discussed, only the overnight attack and its immediate consequences. And that narrow framing creates a feeling almost like a still image frozen in time. A hospital at night, medical workers inside, civilians present, then destruction, then survival through sheltering. The report never expands beyond that moment. It simply documents it carefully, directly, and then leaves the reality standing there. There is also something important in the fact that the medical staff were able to shelter successfully. Because during attacks, infrastructure can fail quickly. Power disruptions, structural damage, confusion inside buildings. Yet, according to the report, enough organization or warning existed for staff to protect themselves before the strike caused full destruction. That detail may ultimately become one of the defining parts of this event. Not only that the hospital was hit, but that people inside survived because they reached shelter in time. And maybe that is why the report feels so haunting in its restraint. It does not need dramatic language. The facts themselves already carry the emotional force. A hospital in southern Ukraine, struck overnight by Russian forces, Key departments destroyed, civilians injured, medical staff alive because they made it underground or behind protection before impact arrived. That is the confirmed reality presented here. And by daylight, those details had already become part of the continuing record of the war unfolding across Ukraine.